Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 132, recording on Tuesday, December 2nd, from the TCO Performance Center in Eagan, Minnesota, where I'm back from Seattle after another road trip, another loss, another miserable offensive performance, and we're going to talk all about it today. Asked for some questions from you guys on social media at Alec_Lewis, and had a bunch of about JJ, about the leadership, about future at quarterback. So we're going to get into all of that today on episode 132 of the Alec Lewis Show. First of all, if you're new here, appreciate you being here. If you don't know me, I cover the Vikings for The Athletic on a day-to-day basis. You can hit the subscribe button on YouTube. There's that little red box in the corner. It's free for you. It helps us out. So would really, really appreciate that. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or wherever you get your podcast, you can rate and review and follow us. And grateful for it. Grateful for those of you who have been and are along the ride of a season that has been turbulent beyond belief. Really, I mean, it's been turbulent beyond belief. It's like the flight to Dublin. You don't really know what's going on. Anyway, this show is presented by First Resource Bank. I hope you guys know about First Resource Bank. It's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. They've got branches all over the place, and it's run by really good people who are navigating this Viking season difficulty, the difficulty of it the same way you guys are. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, Christy at the front desk of the Washington location. I feel for Christy right now. I feel for you guys right now because of how troubling and disappointing this season has been. But First Resource, they really care about the community. Phenomenal online banking platform that I've used since I got here to Minnesota. So please go check out First Resource. Their information is in the description below. The show is also sponsored by Unreal. That's the hoodie I'm wearing. It's a locally owned clothing brand that has limited edition Vikings hoodies. And I've said it on a previous podcast, but I've got friends who want these hoodies, and it's like the Finding Nemo. I mean, that's what it is for these hoodies. So I'm trying to disperse them in the most palatable, meaningful way that I can. But yeah, Unreal is a phenomenal brand. They do a lot of work here locally. It's based here. And then they've also done a great job kind of assimilating into the NFL and other leagues where they've got limited edition drops that will make you look I try to make the clothes look as cool as make me look cooler than I am, so probably can do the same for you guys. All right, we'll hop into the questions, and it'll begin with JJ McCarthy. Just like the straight news of this week, it does sound like JJ McCarthy is clear, almost out of his way, clearing the concussion protocol as long as he practices in full Wednesday with no setbacks. I expect him to be the starter this upcoming weekend against the Washington Commanders. Commanders, a playoff team from last year, just like the Vikings, have had a ton of trouble this season. Some of it is tied to Jaden Daniels, their star young quarterback, not staying healthy. A lot of it is also tied to an aging roster that hasn't performed to the level at which a lot of Commanders fans have wanted them to. And that might sound familiar because you guys can probably relate to that. So let's get right to the questions. The first we will detail and relate to JJ McCarthy. It comes from a Twitter user, Laura Yang. Did the Vikings coaching staff do on-field work with JJ this past offseason once he became healthy, or did it just start with OTAs and training camp? So essentially, besides the NFL rules aspect of the question, like JJ McCarthy was not, he's fully cleared in the spring and summer, and that's the point at which the Viking staff started to work with him on his mechanics and obviously the other subsets of his game and play that needed to be developed and tweaked. This question made me want to say a few things because I've I mean, I've talked a lot about this subject, JJ's mechanics, JJ's development over the course of many, many episodes. And some of this hopefully doesn't sound too repetitive, but I've gone back and I've listened to some stuff and I've studied some of the stuff, writing, talked to people, and just like there are kind of three aspects of this question that my mind went to that I felt like would be worthwhile tossing at you guys. I mean, first and foremost, when JJ McCarthy arrived, the Vikings knew they were going to have to do one thing in particular, or they believed that they needed to do and wanted to do one thing in particular, and it related to his footwork. If you go back, if you're a sicko like me, you guys get home late at night and you're watching film for some weird reason. I almost said a word I probably can't say on the podcast, or maybe I can. I don't know. My parents probably wouldn't be happy with me for it. But if you go back and watch JJ McCarthy and his play at Michigan, there are a lot of times in the shotgun when he's catching the snap where it's very subtle, but his first step is kind of like a gather step. What the Vikings knew they wanted to do early on with JJ McCarthy arriving in this building that I'm sitting in was tweak that step from a kind of a gather hop step on both feet to a punch step on one foot. This stuff is really in the weeds, but obviously when you've done something a certain way, the way JJ McCarthy did, specifically in that 2023 season at Michigan, it takes reps, time, muscle memory to kind of, you're doing a little more rewiring of the, of what you've learned to adapt to this system. Now, you guys are probably sitting there wondering, like, why would you change that if it worked in 2023? Why would you change that in the NFL? And, from what I've ascertained, when you have the gather step on 2 feet that JJ McCarthy had, it's easier to kind of identify where you might be going with the ball and certain concepts. And so, just to fit what this offense wants to do in terms of ensuring that you're not tipping anything off to the opposing defense and guys and coaches who are really, really sharp at this level, that was kind of the preference. Now, when you're doing that, it's a change in movement. You're introducing more movement in terms of the drop. And so that can create just extra, moving parts of the throw that can cause some inaccuracy stuff. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of broach with this subject. The other two, I mean, the Vikings didn't hide behind their belief at the time in the spring and summer of 2024 that they would need to spend the time with JJ McCarthy on ensuring that from a mechanical standpoint, he wasn't overstriding with that left foot, meaning if you just imagine him as a thrower, getting that left foot outside of his body, which just affects the balance of the throw. Like that was something in terms of mechanically that the Vikings knew that they were going to have to work on in detail over the course of his first season and over the course of his development as a thrower in the NFL. The other thing was the touch. I mean, that was like you hear Tom Brady now, if you watch him on any broadcast, he will use these phrases like throw the one ball, which is like a line drive fastball. Throw the 2 ball, which is like a little air under it, and then the 3 ball is probably the deep arcing down the field throw. I mean, the Vikings knew that they were going to need to work on the latter of those two, for simplicity's sake, type of throws with JJ McCarthy. And it remains a question that I've asked, scouts, coaches, people internally, externally, like how possible is it to alter and change and troubleshoot a guy's ability to get the ball up and down and into windows. And that's really so much of this from an overstriding and touch perspective. NFL, first of all, the hashes in the NFL are different. So the space is different than it is in college. And then the players are moving faster than they did in college. And then defenses typically disguise more than they do in college because the players can handle more. And so all of that requires the quarterback to be able to get the ball up and down and into windows. That's why, there's a lot of conversation, and has been for a long time, about pure progression concepts. You guys might be asking me, I'm getting in the weeds, Alec, what is a pure progression concept? That's where a quarterback, instead of making a pre-snap identification of, it's this coverage, so I'm going here. A pure progression concept is really where you go 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, scanning across the field. Part of the reason those have become so in vogue is because of the way defenses are disguising right now. So it's really difficult post-snap to identify where the void is in the coverage. The optimal, teaching progression from a lot of these NFL coaches has been, instead of just identifying what the coverage is and deciding from there, let's just read 1 to 2 to 3, and the concepts that the Vikings have, that other offenses around the league have, are going to be designed to just get players open in windows. But what that requires of you is A, you have to be timed up with the play, and then B, you have to have the arm talent to get the ball up and down into specific windows. Like, there were throws on Sunday with Max Brosmer where the timing was fairly okay, but it's really tough still when a linebacker playing the hook area in the middle of the field is sinking deep. You got to get the ball up and over a guy deep down the field. That's really hard to do. I mean, it's like it's almost in a to use a bad analogy, probably, it's like a guard in the lane playing basketball trying to get a floater up and over Victor Wembanyama. Like, it's really, you have to have real feel and real savvy to do that. And the question that we will ask moving forward is obviously, like, is that something that you just have, or is that something that can be trained? And we will all identify and assess that moving forward with J.J. McCarthy. Like, the last aspect of this question is, the Vikings knew a lot of these things needed work. They needed time. They needed development. Well, J.J. McCarthy had the first summer to work on a lot of that stuff, and then he had the early part of the fall of his rookie season. The torn meniscus obviously prevented him from being on the field throughout the season, on the practice field with the scout team, being able to tweak and try these types of throws and movements the way a golfer would in the offseason on the range. Like, his torn meniscus prevented him from having that time. Then obviously he has to spend the time in between seasons to get healthy. Then he gets back healthy, and he's trying to acquire reps in the offense. It's less and establish optimism and confidence from the coaching staff. It's less about being able to trial and error than it is to perform. And so that developmental time obviously was not there. And then the injuries play a role in it. And none of that is to shoo away or minimize the level of performance thus far. It has been historically bad. And it is really unfortunate that you get to 5 games left in the second season and not feel as if, you don't really feel as if the development timeline or continuum or spectrum, it doesn't feel like you've moved very far on that kind of timeline or continuum. And that is a harsh reality. The hope, obviously, internally, externally, from you guys watching this and listening, is that J.J. McCarthy, through these last 5 games, will show enough to reestablish the level of optimism that existed prior to this season. But it's going to be hard to do that in 5 games. First of all, he's going to have to stay healthy. Second of all, they're going to have to protect for him. Third of all, I would say that the Viking staff is going to have to tailor things to what J.J. McCarthy can do, but it's really difficult because it's got to be difficult for the staff right now, because it's hard to really assess what he can be capable of. Like, screen passes, he's been high and hot on some of those. Runaways to the outside on quick outs, he's missed some of those. Over the middle of the field, that's where some of the interceptions have come and some of the sketchy decision making. So for the Viking staff, you see a lot like, they're not tailoring it to JJ, even a slant. Like, I'd love to see more slants too. There's no doubt about it. But does JJ McCarthy have the level of touch and catchability to his passes that makes a slant viable? And then does that fit everything else within the offense? So, we'll see the last 5 games. It's going to be really interesting to evaluate his performance. Some of the defenses are much tougher than others. I think this Commanders one this weekend is very gettable, so you just have to hope that JJ comes back and can get, find some momentum this upcoming weekend. But regardless, and I wrote this in my story at The Athletic for Tuesday, the Vikings are going to have to find they're going to be back in the all too familiar quarterback market. More than anything, because there's no certainty that J.J. McCarthy can stay healthy for a full season, and this regime will be entering its 5th season without winning a playoff game. So it's and not to mention ownership typically doesn't like just punting on an entire season. This ownership in particular, so it does feel as if the Vikings are going to have to be in that market, and that's going to segue nicely to our next question. All right, Chase Allen wants to know, could you break down what the options might be for the future regarding the quarterback position? Obviously, if JJ progresses the rest of the season, that's option 1. This is Chase saying it. But who would be available from a trade perspective since the free agent market looks to be slim? Your perspective, Chase, of the free agent market for quarterbacks specifically is correct. I had a long conversation the other night with an NFC scout, and we were talking about the Vikings situation, and one of the comments that he made, and I trust him more than I trust myself given the experience and the intel, is just that this quarterback, this is not a free agent quarterback class that blows you away if you need to be living in that market. Now, Chase asked for a breakdown of the options. I'm going to run through a lot of them. I'm not in a position now to, even though I will in a second make a prediction on a guy who makes sense to me. I'm not in a position now from an intel perspective to have a real feel for what the Vikings could do, might do. I mean, those conversations tend to surface in February at the Senior Bowl, Combine, that type of stuff. I mean, that's where, I would come back to the Alec Lewis show, probably with having some more detailed conversations. But in the free agent market, here are just some names. Daniel Jones, we know Daniel Jones well. Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going to say any more there. Last time didn't go well. Jimmy Garoppolo, Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Marcus Mariota. So those are some, that's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names in the free agent market. So that's a lot of those. We could talk through them in particular. Daniel Jones, I haven't watched a ton of Daniel Jones all season, and until I do that, I don't feel very comfortable commenting on what he's looked like. Obviously, the Colts offense has been good. So much of that, to me, projecting is probably tied to the run game, the development of guys on the offensive line. Hint, hint, it's a critical aspect of team building, developing your own offensive linemen. And then Shane Steichen probably having done a good job with Tyler Warren and Pittman and Alec Pierce and the receivers they have. So, I want to watch the film more before I evaluate Daniel Jones. But him being an option is obviously sensible. He was in this building. He knows the system in some capacity. The coaches know him. The Vikings wanted him back last year. So why, if it was available, would they not be interested? The question for him, obviously, with him, would be how much do the Colts try to keep him? What does the money look like? What does the commitment look like from a year's perspective? All that stuff is the conversation. To run through a couple of others, Jimmy G, he's done it before. He's obviously not done enough to prove he's a starter in the league year after year, but he spent time with the Rams building. From everything I know, the Rams really like Jimmy Garoppolo. And so if that's the case, you can imagine Kevin O'Connell would believe he's going to be 34, 35 years old. So something to think about there. And then the other options, some of them are more developmental and like part of the needing a quarterback in general, Chase, to your initial question, would be to ensure that you have someone you can trust because unless J.J. McCarthy blows it out of the water the last 5 games of the season and spends the entire offseason reshaping his mechanics and comes back looking phenomenal, it still wouldn't happen in an NFL game, so it would be harder to trust. The trade options, I'll give you some names here. Mac Jones, Anthony Richardson, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, Davis Mills, Tanner McKee. The Mac Jones one, I mean, look, can he push the ball downfield the way that the Vikings probably want to? It's a fair question. He has been good this year with the 49ers. He looks like a professional quarterback running an offense. He's pretty accurate with the football. Now, living in this trade market, you're going to have to send picks that you really need for young players because of how bare the cupboard is from a draft perspective. That's one aspect. And then even a player like Mac, the likelihood probably would be that you acquire him and his representatives at CAA would probably seek a more long-term deal. And so are you willing to go there? What does that look like monetarily? I mean, these are the questions that, I mean, it feels like we've gone over many, many times. I said to a buddy the other day, and I say this in jest, so hopefully nobody gets mad at me for it, but it feels like on the Vikings beat, you spend February through April figuring out who the quarterback is. And then from May to July, the quarterback gets his feet wet and optimism exists for the quarterback. And then from August to January, there's a lot of ups and downs, and you find yourself then again in February back in this quarterback cycle. And I know that, I mean, I'm saying it in jest, but like being on this beat for 4 years, that is how it feels right now. And so, yeah, I mean, you could go other ways here. Like there's Kirk Cousins. What is Atlanta going to do with Kirk? What does that contract look like? I do know he still has reverence for this place. I do know that he still respects the coaching staff. I do know that, like, if you watch the film with Kirk, is he moving phenomenally? No. Is he going through his reads and throwing the ball pretty accurately? Yes. The film shows that. Anybody who's rolling their eyes or frustrated, go watch the film and pull clips and send them to me because I went through every passing clip of the Jets game this past weekend, and it's not crazy far off from the Kirk that you guys have watched more than I have. Then there's crazier options like people who have been retired, like a Derek Carr or what have you. But and then obviously the draft exists. You know, if the Vikings have a high pick, this would be, for me, I mean, you're making a just massively drastic bet on a guy who would be inexperienced, but rarely do you get to pick high. And so if you're there, I guess that could be another avenue. But, I mean, that runs through a lot of it, Chase. It's probably not going to – like somebody asked a mailbag question, Alec, can you lay out the plan that gives me a lot of hope? I mean, I don't get paid enough to make a lot of these decisions. And I look, we will at The Athletic do a lot of – and here on the podcast – lay out kind of how I assess the offseason plan, but I'm going to have to do a lot of study, a lot of thinking, a lot of cap work to get to that place. Nick Miller, who is one of, always paying attention to the podcast and appreciate him for that. He asked me to, I'll read the question here. Let's see it, if I can find it. Nick asked, if you had to take a wild guess that no one will hold you accountable for when there are still 5 weeks to go, who would be your wild guess on who is the starting quarterback next season? Like, I really don't want this to get aggregated because people will be frustrated that it is what it is. My wild guess, I guess, at this point would be, and again, this is purely speculative. I have not had conversations. I don't expect the team to be in this spot to be, really close to finalizing who they want to target. But the Jimmy Garoppolo one for me would be the most probably, like, it'd be one that that'd probably be where I'd go in the sense that not where I'd go, what I'd do, but familiarity with the system, has done it before, professional quarterback. And you don't have to give up a draft pick. What is he asking for? He played through injury. So that's what I'd say. But, yeah, I mean, you can hold it against me. My skin is absolutely thick. Got to be in this job and any job. Next question comes from Gabby Dirth. What's the benefit of getting a vet quarterback next year? Realistically, the contracts on the team are set up for a rookie contract. If you pivot, you inherently have to take away other veteran talent. Why not give it another year? And if it flops, you just swing again in a good 27 quarterback class. Look, I mean, the points here and the perspective, Gabby, are sensible. It's if you were playing this game in Madden probably, or, in fantasy land, the idea that you'd lose the 2026 season or give J.J. McCarthy a chance to prove or for it to go really right, either of those two options set yourself up optimally probably in the long run. And so that the path and the conversation makes sense. The challenge with it is the potential, downside of you're thinking about an ownership group that is rarely, they have not been ever willing to, throw in the towel, or the 2-15 season. Like, that is not this ownership group's approach, strategy, not what they want. You've got, how do you keep the locker room together with that type of situation? What happened? How does Justin Jefferson feel about that situation? But there's no question. And I know, this is said every year, that the 2027, the next quarterback class might be great, but it does look like that one could be pretty good. Just have a hard time. The other aspect of it is you've got a regime right now that will be entering their 5th season without a playoff win. And so can they, as much as development for J.J. McCarthy is absolutely necessary and reps are required for sure, can the regime, similar to kind of like the Indianapolis Colts before this season with Anthony Richardson, had they rolled with Anthony Richardson in terms of Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, and Anthony Richardson been as inaccurate as he'd been, and it been as much of a struggle as it had been, those guys probably wouldn't be in their jobs. And now, because they signed Daniel Jones, and because he's been serviceable enough and that offense has been good, those guys are there to stay. And so, in a perfect world, what might make sense, there's a lot of dynamics that are worth mentioning and talking about. But I appreciate the question, Gabby. Ryan Fogarty, it appears there is a disconnect within the offense. Is something going on beyond scheme call that is creating issues on the field? Look, Ryan, I don't think there's anything beyond what it's been, which is struggles everywhere. And I tweeted this at Alec_Lewis, where you can follow. And then we have social media accounts at Alec Lewis Show, where our marketing director does a dang good job. But I put on social media after rewatching the tape of the Seahawks game, if you're looking for some smoking gun of what is wrong with this offense, first and foremost, the buck stops with the quarterback position, because it's the most pivotal aspect, the most predictive aspect of who wins and loses in the NFL. But you watch the tape, and the issues are everywhere. From a pass protection standpoint, early in the game, Will Fries gets smoked by Leonard Williams. Receiver standpoint, Jordan Addison drops the ball over the middle of the field. Run game, Aaron Jones doesn't take a great track, or defensive linemen are slanting and getting into the backfield. play calling perspective. Kevin O'Connell himself said the 4th and 1. He didn't like the call. It wasn't mitigating risk enough. Quarterback inaccuracy, decision making. I mean, you could, I could go position by position, drive by drive, run game, pass game, drop back, shotgun, under center, and there are, pre-snap penalty operation, whether it's false starts from Christian Darrisaw or Brian O'Neill or Ben Urasek. I mean, you want to pinpoint one thing, you guys can go right ahead, but this is a collective offensive abomination. Like, that's what it's been. When you have done what you've done the last 6 quarters, there is no sugarcoating it on my end. It has been miserable to watch. It's hard to believe it's going to increase and improve dramatically. And, for the record, it's not just me, it's not just you guys. There have been people internally who have questioned the idea that it would improve dramatically on a weekly from one week to the next. It's just not feasible. It's not realistic. And so, I get a little fired up by the question because, it's easy to blame it on one person, one aspect of one coach, one player, one position group. Collectively right now, it has been a failure. There's just no other way to say that one. And in addendum to this, and I'll just say this, did a long story for Wednesday on the run game, and the run phase and the conversations we've had on this show and in writing for 4 years now. Highly recommend you guys going to read that tomorrow on Wednesday morning. Put a lot of work and effort and time into it. Mention, aspects of the team, mention aspects of the staff, mention other teams and what they've done from a run game perspective. And so it's a conversation that, because the quarterback occupies so much of the airspace, and it has to because of its importance, there are a lot of things to talk about, and run game is one of them. So wrote about it for Wednesday. Please go check that out over at The Athletic. Next question we will get to. All right, this one is from Jocks Rodaire. Jocks asked, is Mike Pettin still on the coaching staff? From my understanding, yes. I've been asked many times about why Mike Pettin wasn't in Seattle for the game. Just sounded like a personal health thing that needed to be taken care of. I'll also say, Mike Pettin doesn't he's not really in charge of much with the staff. His title is assistant to the head coach. Last year he filled in as the outside linebackers coach, but he doesn't do that anymore. That job is Thad Bogertis, and I think that and the job that he's done with that group is part of the reason why Dallas Turner has come on of late. Really think he's a good coach. Will be around the league for a long time. But yeah, Mike Pettin wouldn't put too much into that one, is what I would say. The next question comes from Riley Thompson. Riley asks, how does an extremely disappointing season from a team impact the beat reporters and people covering the team? Any changes in the job? You try not to ride the wave, but it's just what I would say is it's probably, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or how others would answer this question. I just know for myself, it's probably not uplifting. Being at the facility every day, it probably becomes a little taxing because, I'd equate it in some ways to imagine you're showing up to the work every day and the business is really struggling. And so everybody is kind of on edge because of that. That in many ways, that's what it feels like. And then you don't get to highlight, because there's so much focus on the team and what's going on and analysis on those subjects. For me personally, you don't get to do the types of feature, inspirational, revelatory pieces about what guys overcome and what they stand for, than kind of you want to do. So that's what I'd say. But yeah, it's a good question. Good question. I appreciate it. There were a lot of questions about Kwesi, and I don't want to avoid the subject because I'm sure that would be something that I would take flack for or something like that. But I mean, look, the facts are the facts with the situation right now. The drafts have not provided enough fruit to where the team hasn't had to live in the free agency bargain bin. And it's like the aisle that you're shopping in when you're shopping in free agency. A lot of the players have had injury histories. A lot of the players are aging. Last year in free agency, it was a spectacular shopping spree, to use the same analogy. Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel. I could go on. This year, obviously, that free agent shopping spree, you're not left with a ton. Brian Kelly hasn't played a lot. Obviously, with the concussion injury, with the concussions, and now with the hip injury. Will Fries has played every game. He's been serviceable. Anything more than that, to me, would be overstating it. Has had trouble on screens getting out and making blocks. Has gotten beat in pass pro and in the run game at times. He raises the floor a little bit, but, and you got to pay some players, but has he played to his value? Doubtful. The interior defensive linemen, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, not really many splash plays at all. They've played admirably at times, but not giving the immense impact and boost that you that you hope for when you sign them those contracts. Jalen Redmond's been the best interior defender. Don't even think that's really close, so that's tough. Eric Wilson was a phenomenal sighting. That was, his defensive kind of impact has been beyond the expectation. And then Isaiah Rodgers has been serviceable similarly. I mean, he had the historic game against the Bengals, but it was against the Bengals and Jake Browning, who was, obviously the Bengals acquired Joe Flacco. So, the free agency success that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was able to hang his hat on after last season, which is partially why he received the extension, has not shown itself this year. And then, from the draft perspective, your big hits, it's Jordan Addison, who hasn't been incredibly reliable this year on the field. Don't need to broach the off-the-field topic. Obviously hasn't been reliable there. Will Reichard has been really, really good. Jalen Naylor has turned into a really, really good player to a point where you almost wonder if extending him and choosing to part with Addison. I don't know how realistic of a conversation that is, but it does feel like one that may deserve a little more life than you would have originally thought. Donovan Jackson has been solid, definitely for a rookie at left guard, has had his injuries this year. So, and then Dallas Turner, he's played better the last few weeks. The splashes are obviously there. I'd say if you really go watch the film from a down-to-down perspective, the splashes are there, but Brian Flores says it all the time. You can have 10 sacks, but what do you do on the other 1,000 plays that you play in a season? And I still think from a run game perspective, he can be pushed off the line of scrimmage. And then from a pass rush perspective, there's still development necessary in terms of adding tools to his tool bag. The explosiveness is there. Just got to see it consistently. And then the other aspect of the Kwesi conversation that, nobody's probably going to want to hear, and it only goes so far because Kwesi is the general manager and decisions fall on his desk. But there is, and there has been, a lot of personnel influence from this coaching staff. And there is in every building, but there is no question that over the last couple of years, both in the draft and in free agency, the coaches say, in terms of decision-making, has grown and increased. And so, again, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is paid to be the general manager, and the decisions and the roster moves fall on his desk. But in my opinion, covering this thing from the perch that I do, there has to be a mindfulness to the structure and the decision making and the influence and how that's kind of been, especially of late. So that's how I'll answer that question. It's not my job. It's also not how I view my job to call shots like that. I'll leave that to hot take, take people and like my job is to analyze it as clear-headed as I possibly can. I guess I didn't mention, the trades for Pitt, the trade for TJ Hawkinson, that paid dividends early, but has not done as much of late. The first draft trade, trading back and drafting Lewis Seen, obviously a failure. The entire draft was a failure. Not generating more return for that trade was a failure. The Adam Thielen trade has not been great. It was not great. The Cam Robinson trade, it was what it was. You gave them credit for taking a stab, but Cam Robinson did not really perform. So, similar to the offense, and again, maybe you guys will say this is a cop-out, but it's how I genuinely feel. If you're trying to pin where the Vikings are as an organization on one particular person, probably not correct. But again, when you are I will say this: when you are hired to do those jobs, when you're hired in that role, you know the requirement, the expectation, the standard, and the task. So that's how I'll talk about that one, and we'll end there. We'll end there on that beautifully high, very positive note here on the Alec Lewis Show. I want to be more positive. I really do. I was. You can ask some of my colleagues, showing up to Lumen Field on Sunday, getting to watch that matchup, getting to watch Sam Darnold, getting to watch Max Brosmer. I was excited. The sun was out. It was a beautiful day. Fans were into it. I felt really good. But it's tough out there. I will say this, and maybe I shouldn't, but Sam Darnold after the game in the tunnel saw some of the Vikings riders and approached, and it shook all of our hands. For him to do that, I think was a pretty reflective kind of thing of who that guy is and how he treats people and stuff. So it meant something to me, especially given, pretty critical of him on the way last year down the stretch. So, that was cool. But no, look, it's anybody who feels like it's tough situation right now with the organization. To be 4-8 with the expectations of this season, it just is what it is. You got to call it like it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Can't sugarcoat it. Have to be real and honest and true, and we'll try to do that still on a weekly basis here on the Alec Lewis Show. Should have a guest for you who I'm looking forward to having later this week. And then stories of the Athletic. I mentioned the run game story for Wednesday. We'll have much more coming down the stretch and into the holidays. Hope you guys are managing the snow, the weather, and the season. But yeah, with that, appreciate you guys being here on episode 132 of the Alec Lewis Show. First Resource Bank, the presenting sponsor. Please go check them out in the description. Unreal, the clothing brand, providing us with some phenomenal stuff, and you guys too, specifically with the limited edition drops. Thank you guys for being here. We will talk to you very, very soon.